he simply provided. And so, like, the immense amount of respect that we all had for him, like, through, watching his struggle and helping to try to make his life as comfortable as possible. We were very aware of the fact that his, body was coming to, its end at a certain point, and like for him to be able to go out in a way where he's talking to all of the people who, like, his life impacted, I think no other way, like, there's no better way for him to have gone. And we all were immediately cognizant of that, so. Do you have anything to say, or?
Back to your original question, if any of us objected, none of us objected, but that's a hard thing to hear, and it was an overnight sort of thing. It was like, once he was in the hospital, he just had a change of heart, and we all saw it, and it was like, it went from, I'm happy to keep on living to just like, I don't want this anymore. And I don't know. I think we all felt like it was no use fighting. It's just like it's a sad thing to hear. We weren't like rooting that on or anything, but we just wanted to help him, and he had been through so much pain.
There is that moment in the movie where I think it's you, Rachel, who says, like, what changed? And somebody says, confidence. Confidence. And so that's sort of what you're saying.
Well, that's interesting, too, because I don't know if you noticed that I flashed back to October 2020, and he didn't think anything happened after we die 6 months prior. But when he was coming closer to death, it was like a veil lifted or thinned, and he could see his family, and he had confidence that he would be watching over us. It was true.
Yeah.
He could see it. And he was agnostic before that. Or not even. He was an atheist, basically. Well, sort of, right?
He was agnostic.
He was agnostic.
No, it's interesting because our mom, who's watching, I think, hi Mom, was like definitely an atheist, and Dad was more open-ended about it, and obviously this is something we talked about, and as I became a rabbi, and as he would come to High Holy Day services first in LA, and then he didn't come here, but he would watch. He started more and more to feel connected, and it became more important to him. And he would, in High Holy Day services, I remember in LA one time he said to me, I sat there and I just cried because I could feel my parents here with me. And so there was a way that he was open to it, but he was not a believer.
Yeah.
But he really turned towards Judaism at the end. He really did.
Clearly.
When he was not necessarily, he wasn't that steeped in it. No.
So let's talk about the cameras in the room. Both the conversations that you all had about them in the moment, and then and how those conversations changed over time. And then the other question I had this time watching the movie was, do you think that your dynamics as a family changed or were altered as a result of the cameras in the room?
So I'm the one. We've been a little bit on tour with this film, and we've done questions and answers, and we always talk about how I'm the one who didn't like the cameras the most, and that's always true. And the thing about Andi is that she films everything all the time, like all the time, like really, like who's filming right now?
Since you were
right now, Morgan is filming for us because everything is filmed like literally all the time, and so. Having cameras in the room, first of all, I wished that there were not cameras in the room, but once I knew that my dad was good with it, I was like, okay, he's dying, not me. Like, if he's okay, I'm not gonna do anything about that. But the thing about it changing our dynamics that it's really probably hard for anybody to understand is that we're used to having cameras on all of our lives. And all her stuff that she films just ends up in like, a storage device. Like, it never goes anywhere. So there was no. I didn't mean that. I just meant like the stuff of us. The stuff of us. Like, I did not think I was going to be in a movie. I did not think it was. So I think that for us, it made it so that we could ignore the cameras and just be together. And I know that for me, it was essential. When I walked in the room and saw those cameras there, I felt like, okay, my job is to block those because this is way too important for anything to affect what's happening here. And that it worked, and I did not think about them at all. And I think that's true for all of us because of our experience with being filmed all the time and because it was too important.
Well, I'll say this. I mentioned I didn't intend to make a film, and so I didn't know I was making a film, but I think Dad knew I was making a film. Mom seemed like she was very relieved that something would be left of Dad when he was gone, and I think maybe Dad did too. I'm not sure, but he said, I instinctively know you're on the right track, and he would never, as you saw in the movie, let the camera get stopped for any reason. She didn't want it turned off. But I knew Rachel was really sensitive, and I went to see a therapist because I thought, am I trying to mediate? Like, why do I feel like I have to film right now? I've written a script about Dad. I have no intention of making a documentary. I just felt it such an instinct and urge to film, and I thought she'd say it was a terrible idea, but instead she said, if you feel you should film, then you should film. And so then it became about, okay, I do not want to hurt Rachel's experience of this in any way. So I'm going to try. Rachel's going to come out 5 days before Dad dies, and by then, this process has to be invisible. Like, of course, there's cameras, and the main camera was actually not in the room. It was behind a bookshelf in another room, shooting through a door. And I found Juki crying, listening to a very intimate conversation with Mom and Dad once. And my brother said the other day, it gave us an opportunity to sometimes listen in.
So you had dailies? You kind of had dailies.
Dailies? What do you mean?
Well, like when you're making a movie at the end of the day.
Oh, no. I'm saying during it.
While
so
they were
Mom is alone with Dad in the room, and Juki's not in the room, but he can hear. And I found him just crying behind the camera.
There's a
So
lav mic on his bed, so all of his conversations are taped, and so people are just coming up to him and having these really important, life-changing, profound conversations. And I was just witnessing a moment between my grandmother and my grandfather, and in a way, like, my grandmother seemed to be kind of hiding from his end in the way that anyone would be in denial of, when someone's sitting in your living room, you don't expect them to be gone within a few hours. But she had like a really genuine moment with him, and I was just breaking down in the other room. Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes the cameras would turn off, the microphones would turn off. Filming wasn't the primary thing. I was his quarterback of his care when the other two kids couldn't be there that whole time. Right. And setting up the Zoom calls and trying to get him to realize everything he'd given us, and trying to get Mom to face the fact that Dad was going to be gone. Like, these were the primary issues, and we're the T-team. Like, we were like bonded by fire back then when the stroke happened. And I think a big reason I filmed was because I can't remember him before that. He had a stroke when I was 9.5, and I do not remember him moving his body, and I did not want to forget him now. So for me, the urge was great, but I also really tried to make it, camera stationary and that kind of thing for Rachel.
And I'll just say that I've been the one not into the idea of this being a film or of being filmed, and the experience of watching this with audiences has just made me realize, like, I was wrong, she was right. I mean, really, and I say that, and it's really important. Like, she was right. I'm really glad this exists. I feel like it's helping people. I feel like it's a chance to talk about things we don't usually talk about. I feel like it might be a chance to change some laws that need to get changed.
Yeah, I mean, I was saying to you, Rachel, the other day that what's so beautiful about the movie to me is that it's both a very ordinary story and a very extraordinary story. We've all been, or many of us have been, in those rooms at the ends of people's lives, and they all have that kind of holy, messy, the surface is filled with the accoutrements of a sick person. It feels very familiar to me. But then this decision is really extraordinary. Most of us have not lived through that. And so you're flipping back and forth between the ordinariness of just a human life and the extraordinary decision that your father made. I love that. Why, this is sort of a throwaway line in the movie, or like just, it happens very fast, but why did your father not support your being a rabbi?
He wanted me to be an ethics professor.
Uh-huh.
And it comes down to he was not interested in the religion of Judaism. It was not interesting to him. He was, as you can see, like very strongly identified with the Jewish people and raised money for the Jewish people and for Israel, and it was really very important to him, and wanted us to all, have a religious school education and become B'nai Mitzvah. But he didn't think. I think that he didn't think that it was good enough for me, actually. Huh. And then when I did it, he got it. He really got it. I mean, aside from just the very end of his life, he really got it. And he was really proud of me, and I think he just hadn't understood what it could be. Like we had been in, and I've talked about this actually from this bima, that we'd been in synagogues that were, that I wouldn't go back to. And and he'd experienced, a form of Judaism that didn't speak to his heart or his soul or his mind really is a big part, or his mind. And I think seeing me do my thing, he realized that it was something he hadn't imagined.
Can I say that we as a family talked about it, and we were all shocked by Rachel's decision to be a rabbi, her calling. And I think that they shared with me a concern that her incredible force that she is, the passion she brings to civil rights, to equal rights, to human rights, to rights in general, that it was not going to be able to be at full bloom and spread as far and wide as it was in her 20s when she was working and raising millions of dollars for all of these organizations in San Francisco. And that was the concern, was that it was going to not be for everyone. It was just going to be for the lucky, you all. Yeah, but that's not true. And we came to understand that this was actually an incredible vehicle for making all those changes. And one of those things that I'm so excited to be filming now is I'm filming All God's Children, which is about the union between CBE and ABC. And I see ABC Antioch Baptist Church. And I've been filming that since before the pandemic. And I see Reverend Waterman over there. And I see Walik in the back. And I know there's others here. And I'm just very excited about that project, because I think a lot of what they're going to be doing is going to be fulfilling a dream that Dad had of making reparations in any way that's possible. And so that's exciting.
And I'm curious about the young people. Did your experience with your grandfather and the Judaism that sort of infused that whole experience, did it change your ideas about, or your relationship with the religion, or your connection to it?
Absolutely. I don't know if you remember our conversations from that time, Aunt Rachel, but I mean, I came to Southern California to say goodbye to my grandfather when I was a junior in college. I had left school for a week. And it was, I think I've always been interested in like metaphysics and ethics and thinking about big questions. I was a philosophy major in college, so, but I definitely considered myself agnostic. And I think it's important to acknowledge that I didn't grow up a practicing Jew, too. So there are certainly like Jewish roots I identify with, and obviously Aunt Rachel being a rabbi, when we would go to temple, it was to see her. It wasn't to go to temple, So I always felt like a little bit on the outside of it, and also like that I just wasn't getting something about it. But I do think that like being there in that room and like going through the prayers and the rituals that you go through when in a Jewish death, it gave structure to this nebulous, terrifying thing. And it gave us something to hold on to, and a vehicle for us to be able to comfort him, too. And there were just many moments in that room where I felt there was a connection to something beyond us in our individual lives. And it was a moment afterwards I was like, like, I don't know why I never thought about like religion. I don't know why I never thought about Judaism more seriously. So that's something that I'm continuing to think about. But it was something that certainly like opened my eyes in many ways. I can't speak for Zhuki, but
I mean, yeah, I think totally it made me more invested in not only my heritage but in my religion. I think part of I'm a junior or a sophomore at Oberlin, and it's a very Jewish community there, and so naturally I've become much more invested since then. But with my grandfather's death, practicing the mourner's Kaddish was really important to me afterwards, paying respect, and now being at school, I heard that on Yom Kippur, and being able to sing along, knowing the words felt really great. And also I think on this final day, like hearing you, Rachel, singing was so comforting for me, and as Owen said, gave some structure to something that seems so like impossible to tackle. And like it just, I think like I'm definitely more interested in the religion, but I'm 100% like invested in my blood as a Jewish person, and the Jewish like family of people. I think is really important that we stick together as a people. Yeah.
So I have one more question, and then I want to open it up to the audience. And it's kind of a broad question, but in the aftermath of this film, what are some of the results that have surprised you, both creatively, artistically, but also politically, legislatively? Like, what has been the fallout that you didn't expect? And where do you go from here? I mean, you were talking about the crazy tour you're on now through when?
It's been, I mean, so we premiered at Sundance, which turned into a virtual Sundance because of Omicron. And so Rachel came out just because we wanted to all be together as a family, even though the film was going onto the internet. It was sort of scary. The night before, I was like, what have I done? I mean, this is my family at their most raw and vulnerable, and nobody expected this, and Mom's in rollers, and David's talking about how he's wearing the same shirt 3 days in a row.
I had the same sweatshirt on every single day. I don't know if you saw that.
And Rachel's
I did
like,
not know I was in a movie.
Yeah, and Rachel's writing an article for the Forward to try to get ahead of the fact that Reform Judaism still did not consider this legal. So all of that was happening, and we were together. And then it went out, and we gathered together, friends of ours threw a gathering, a watch party in Park City. And then we just saw a rush of emails. And the emails, like, we stayed up till, 3, 4 in the morning. I would read one, Rachel would read one. I would read one, Rachel would. I mean, it was just like the most heartfelt. I have never made anything even approaching this impactful in my entire life. I had no idea how, I knew it was important, I knew it was profound, and that there were lessons in there that I felt like it was almost like a guide that hopefully could help people, but I didn't realize just how much people would see their own families on screen, that we understand as filmmakers that the more intimate you get, the more relatable. Just sort of an oxymoron in a way. It is not really logical. I think if you threw like a wide blanket over something, then everybody would find space in there. But it's really in the details of our particular family and that people find themselves. And it's helped people so much. So that happened. Then we worked dark until Telluride. And then we've been, on the road ever since. And yeah, it's just a blessed journey to be able to share Dad. I've had journalists like burst out crying in England and apologizing to me when they just when they talk about how extraordinary Dad is, and they start crying, and I'm just saying, don't cry. Don't apologize. I love that somehow through the power of film, and this is the thing I've also been blown away by, is the power of film. I mean, not only was it after 30 years of making films, was it there for me emotionally? It was there for me finally. Like it was a safety blanket that I knew I wouldn't totally lose Daddy, you know, as a daughter. Then as a filmmaker, I started to be able to grieve in a way that I mean, with laughter and tears, but he's no longer suffering, so I don't have to worry about that. He's where he wants to be, and I get to be with him. And then, you know, to share it with people, it's an incredible experience. And I don't know where we are in it, but I'm definitely still on the road for a while. I think the final showing here in New York is planned right now is December 5th at Lincoln Center. So that's going to be really cool. And then, I mean, we're in Chicago on the 3rd. I urge all of you to try to go to my Instagram, and there's a link tree, or go to our website. It's playing all over the place. It's in theaters now around the country.
And I would just say, you know, as someone who didn't like this idea originally of the film, it's just been so moving to share it with people. People, like Andi said, people, perhaps you know, feel so many feelings and feel all the things about our own lives, our own loved ones, the deaths we've lived through, our own mortality, how we want to embrace life. And this is what I do. Like, this is what I do, right? I've been with many of you around your own loved ones' deaths, and it's what I do. And I've never had such a big impact in terms of that many people who are wanting to connect on it, and it's like incredibly meaningful.
And talk about the Judaism shift. Has there been a shift in the law?
Oh, thank you. Yes. I told you that. Yes. Yes. So, oh no, I told everybody that on Yom Kippur. So, yes, so the Reform movement, at the time that Dad died, the Reform movement called that murder. It was completely opposed to it, and that's why it was problematic for me in terms of my rabbinate, and I had to write something in the foreword, and I had to worry that, you know, people would criticize me a lot, and it didn't happen. Nobody criticized me. And then this summer, the Reform movement completely changed its position. And now the movement, they've written a beautiful responsum, and you can read it. It's complex and thoughtful and draws from the traditional sources a lot, and basically supports, it's about Canada's medical aid in dying law, and it fully supports a person's choice to end their life when they're at the end of their lives. There's a caveat in the responsum about the United States, which is that we do not have universal health care. And therefore, they're concerned that a person might make that choice here because they couldn't afford care. And so we've got work to do, right? And one of the things also is that in New York, we don't have this law. It's been in the health committee, in the legislature, in the assembly for 7 years. It has not moved. The primary reason it's not moving is because of religious objections. The fact that I am in this as a New York rabbi is quite meaningful, and we were asked to screen it to the state legislature, which we did with a Q&A. It was on Zoom because of COVID, but I'm hoping we'll get another chance. I've been asked to pull together a coalition, an interfaith coalition of clergy, to begin to try to move that bill.
Can you tell them the wickedness line?
Andi wants me to tell you that in the Reform responsum, they quote Soloveitchik as saying, and this is going to be a paraphrase, but that any law that does not come from tenderness is wickedness.
One last thing I'd say is that what surprised us too was the things that happen to people's lives after seeing the film. Like, they go reunite with their parents that they haven't talked to, and you know, several people have told me they're now connected again with parents they've been estranged from for years, you know. And Rachel said something at a Q&A recently that I think is so true. It's just like our fear of death and our terrible fear, and also just it's so taboo. We don't really have any representations of grandkids sitting at the bedside. Right. And there's something that's immensely life affirming about that? Just what is it that basically we're cheating our lives by not embracing death? We have a chance.
My Kol Nidre sermon is on the CBE website. It's exactly that. It's exactly that.
Yeah.
That's what I said for on Kol Nidre. Yeah.
Okay, fine. Here we go. Here's the exercise.
So-
Remember the exercise?
So we have maybe 10 minutes for questions. Do people have questions? This is your moment.
Also, while the mic's coming, I just want to make sure you know there's a reception after with wine and cheese. So if you want to stick around, this part Q&A will be over pretty soon, and then we'll have a chance to have a little reception. Yeah.
Hi. Can you hear me?
A little bit.
This is something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and I have discussed it with my family, for down the road. But it's interesting, and I'd like to ask you, since you've been through this, it feels like it's a really big ask to help, for my family to help me do this when the time is right. Like, I didn't even want to be my mother's healthcare proxy. She's 94 years old, because I didn't want to be the one to make the decision, to pull the plug. And is it right to ask your family to do something like this for you? How did you feel about that?
We all felt, when our dad asked us for this, not one of us felt that it was too much to ask. We felt that it was a way we could support his agency, support his ability to make a decision when he'd had no ability to make a decision for so many years, and to give him back some power and to give him back a chance to control the end of his life. And I personally felt like when he was begging me and I didn't know there was a law, I wanted to do anything. I mean, I was definitely not going to do something illegal, but I wanted to help him. It did not feel like too much to ask at all. And I want to say to you that if you think about this for yourself and you think, I don't want to burden my family, check that out first, because they might want to help you if this is what you want. And that's certainly what we all felt.
Sorry for your loss, first of all. I just want to say that while I was watching the movie, what was going through my mind a lot was how lucky you all were to have each other, because in my family, it happened overnight, and my mother asked me. I have a sister, but my sister was asleep in the waiting room at 3 o'clock in the morning when my mother took off the mask. And I didn't understand why she did it. And she put it back on because I said, "Mommy, you're scaring me." So she put it back on, and she waited a few minutes, and she took it back off. And I got it, because she was totally compos mentis, and I knew that she knew what she was doing. She put the mask back on, and I said, "I got it, Ma. You want to turn off the respirator." So I got the message directly to me, and me alone. I ran into the waiting room. I got my sister, and I told her what was happening. And she says, "You don't know that Mommy wants the respirator turned off." I said, "Ask her yourself." And in the morning, the doctor had ordered a feeding tube, and we had discussed it during the night. My mother said, "No feeding tube, no oxygen, tomorrow." Just like your dad had 15 days to change his mind. My mom said in the morning, no feeding tube, no respirator, no nothing. I want it over. And I was the one that told the doctor. So when I was watching all of you together and the love in your family, that was all on me. So this was especially beautiful to me to see you all getting along like that.
Hi. So clearly this was a film about a man's death, and you included a significant part of his life and a lot of the Air Florida stuff, but I just was curious why you didn't include some of his other really remarkable business accomplishments and his vast I mean, he was an amazing businessman before Air Florida. So I was curious to know how you made the decision about what you were going to include and what you were not going to include in terms of his life.
So I want to give the mic to Andi because she's the one to answer that question, but I just want those who are listening to know that Bennett Kleinberg, our member, asked if he could work on Dad's Wikipedia page and actually researched Dad's life and made his Wikipedia page, which was an incredible gift. So he actually knows all about my dad's life. And so now Andi will answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, all of you don't know about Dad's other businesses. You must have thought that question was weird. Bennett, thank you for making that Wikipedia page. It was incredibly generous of you to do that. And today he showed up with a picture of Dad. I've never met Bennett, but Bennett came up to me before the screening with a picture of Dad on the front page of the Miami Daily News with the Beatles, Paul McCartney and George Harrison on the, yeah, you're gonna want that. But Dad had a candy company. Dad had a roofing company that he turned into 53 other businesses. He was awarded early on for being the top businessman to hire disabled people. He had a whole mute team of women packing all his candy at Laura Lee Candies. He has an incredible life story. He brought that spirit and that love to everything he did, and every business was a family. And so that's why, since I became a filmmaker, my intention and my dream has been to make a film about my father. And I have written the film, and I was reading it to him in his final days. It didn't make the doc. And in that film, I cover a lot of his life. But I don't, I'm known mostly as a documentary filmmaker, and people would say, well, why aren't you making a documentary about your dad? You love that story. That's like your favorite story. And I didn't have any archival footage. I mean, the only footage I have is what you see there. I really don't have anything of Laura Lee Candies. And this all started because Rachel asked me to make this memorial video 2 weeks after Dad died. And I sat down thinking I'd make a 5-minute video. And we did this obituary where our brother wrote an obituary that I ran by him, as you saw in the movie. And the memorial video has the obituary, which we'll send you, actually. You should totally have that. And you can see, what I used for the Laura Lee Candy and stuff. We just don't have the footage, So, yeah. The crash. That's not, thank you for asking that. So 6 months before Dad's stroke, about January 13th, 1982, there was a terrible crash. And in the Potomac River. And I don't know if you remember back then, but there were a lot of crashes. In fact, there were like several that spring. There was even Pan Am crash, and there was an Eastern crash. But this crash was very tragic. I mean, 5 people survived. There's a movie of the week called Flight 90 about it. It's a big part of the script. It's not in the doc because it never came up. Dad, there were several things with the crash, but I know we've got to be brief, but there were other reasons that the crash happened, like American Airlines and Boeing and air traffic control all had to pay along with Air Florida for that crash because they were all responsible for it. So it wasn't something I think our father carried in the same way as the shame he felt around borrowing money from his friends and being turned down by banks. And more than anything, he felt like a failure that he had failed us. David's car being repoed and them having to downsize. His disability insurance was cut off at 65. And so they couldn't downsize fast enough. And that was what he was carrying, so that's what's in the movie. It was really a movie about his final days.
Okay, so one more question.
Hi. It seemed like the editing was so tight and such a great job editing this film, which must have been so difficult to do. I'm just curious if you had any thoughts about the process of editing this thing that could have, and probably was a beast, that you were able to trim down and make it so tight.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, editing is my most addictive quality. I can't ever leave an edit room. But this time, I really couldn't leave because Dad was alive inside the Avid, and it was just so compelling. In my house, when I walk out of my bedroom, I can go right towards the edit bay or left towards the rest of the house, and I would just like that way. And I would stay there for 18 hours at a time, just flowing with it. It just kind of came through me like nothing I've ever edited before. I really think this is Dad's final gift to me and to us. It was like instinctively, I just knew what to do. And the one part, obviously, that I couldn't edit at first was his death. I just couldn't edit the raw footage. I needed to get a couple people to just try to piece something together. And then as soon as I saw that, which I just wept through seeing that, then I realized, oh, but this has to be in it, and this part, and this, and this, and this. And then I ended up editing that day, probably 50, 70 times. What were you going to say? Oh, when the crash?
No, I was going to just say how quickly you did it. In comparison, I've watched her edit films for my entire life and sat in the edit bay on the beanbag chair and done whatever for some of those 18-hour sprees. And, this one was, surprisingly short, 2 months or something, and you were done.
For the first cut, it was 2 months because it was just and we were walking this plank. I wanted the film to feel I want all my films to feel like being there. I feel like the power of film is to make it as authentic as possible. And so we felt like it was 15, 14, 13. And of course, I put things together. I put the grandkids together. I put the Zoom calls together. I altered, exactly how things went for the flow of the story. But all of that just kind of came really naturally. And then I was like, oh my God, I know. When I got, Zhuki holding his hand, I was like, I know I filmed Dad teaching Zhuki how to make a turkey. And then it was about digging and refining. And I actually ended up working on the film, throughout the year. And then on Dad's birthday, I was putting the finishing touches on it, and I saw an incredible moment. I was like, what is that? And then I clicked on it, and it was the scene where he says, Biden won and so did I. And I was there for that. But that's the kind of shock we were in at the time. That's why I had a Nest camera, because I knew I won't necessarily know the chronology of time, and I won't remember some of that, because Rachel looks at the camera and looks at me and says, we did it, and it's the best moment, to actually, and so it came on his birthday on 12/12. Bam, suddenly there was a new scene to put in the movie. Okay, time to cut a few other things down. The editing process never stops until it's time to show the movie. That's the deal. So it's a very arduous process, but thank you for acknowledging that. I appreciate it.
So thank you, all of you.
I want to thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Lisa. I want to thank you, Lisa, and I want to thank my sister Andi for making an amazing film. And my nephews, Zhuki and Eli Owen, for being here. And I want to thank the Brooklyn Community Foundation. I'm a trustee on the board of the Brooklyn Community Foundation, and they have so generously sponsored our reception tonight. There's delicious wine and cheese, and we invite you to stay and mingle. And if you had a question that you didn't get to ask, you can ask. And in a few moments, I'll let Jocelyn Rainey, who's the CEO of the Brooklyn Community Foundation, just say a minute about their Elders Fund, which they want to make sure that we know about. But for now, thank you for being here. Come eat and drink and enjoy. Thank you.